So I had figured that there was something up with the case of Jacob Blake. Remember, this is now the latest version of the BLM narrative of cops shooting a man who is black and unarmed for no reason other than either an overt or perhaps a subconscious racism. But it has to be one or the other. That's what we're led to believe, right? That there's nothing else going on. There's nothing else that we have to see with all of this. We already know everything that everything that we have to in order to come to a conclusion that the cop involved should lose his job, probably lose his freedom, really effectively lose his life. That's what the narrative is. That's what the expectation of the libs, the Democrat Party, has become. You're not allowed to wait for additional facts. You're not allowed to see if there's anything else that changes the narrative. George Floyd, enormous changes in that narrative since we first saw that video. And why is it that the public only gets to see a very shortened version of these arrests? It's absolutely necessary to see the entire exchange, right? Just think about this in day-to-day life. If you saw a video of a friend of yours punching a stranger in the face at a bar, and that's all you saw, you'd say, wow, he committed assault. That's a crime. You can't do that. If you saw a video of a friend of yours punching a stranger in the face at a bar, after that stranger had grabbed your friend's wife's behind and tried to, pull her toward him, you'd say, guy had it coming. All that the difference is there that you need to know is the information around the incident, right? That makes all the difference in the world. And yet we have this repetition of the same thing. We see one video clip. You better say the cops are racist and this was a murder or this was an attempted murder in the case of Jacob Blake, or else they'll ruin you. Corporations will fire you. You'll lose your job. Your reputation in tatters. That's the game that's been forced on all of us now. Bend the knee or else. This is how much power this movement, BLM, has been able to gather. And it's all built on lies. Built on lies, the whole thing. That's why it always ends up collapsing into disarray, anarchy, violence, misery. This movement is not making anyone's lives better. This movement is not improving anything in this country. And it's not the first time the movement has existed. Think back. When did the BLM start? Started in 2013 online with a hashtag Black Lives Matter. Why didn't that just continue in a straight line to today? Certainly Black Lives mattered as much in 2016 as they did in 2013 as they do in 2020. So why did the movement disappear? Oh, because there were assassinations of police officers that occurred as a direct result of the rhetoric of the movement that had followers that just believed what BLM was saying. The assassination of officers Ramos in lieu of the NYPD right here in New York, and then 5 Dallas police officers murdered by a madman who, yes, was also a devotee of Black Lives Matter rhetoric. And as I've said before, if what the movement claims is true, if law enforcement was really systemically racist and hunting young black men as some kind of racist sport, it would be a moral obligation to take up arms against law enforcement. Of course, that's all a lie, right? The same way that I could tell you it would be a moral obligation if a presidential administration was stealing people from their homes in the night, sending in the equivalent of the Gestapo or the Stasi to steal people from their homes. Yeah, you take up arms against your own government, right? But that's not happening. And to say that's happening, even though some libs do claim that stuff is going on right now, is completely insane. It's a lie. The fundamental problem with the BLM movement is that it is built upon lies, and therefore it needs further lies to perpetuate itself. Now, what do I mean by bringing up the Jacob Blake case. We saw that initial video, and I thought, look, we can't really tell if this is a good shoot. That's the police terminology. They'll say a good shoot, meaning a legally justified shooting, or not. We can't tell. It seemed to me from the beginning, and you can go back. You don't ever have to take my word for it when I say, oh, I said this, right? You can just go on Spotify, the iHeart app, listen to the podcast of the show, and just check my work. And I invite you to do that anytime. But if you go back, you'll hear that I thought this seemed like likely a justified shooting because he did not comply. Blake did not comply with clear commands. Law enforcement had their weapons drawn, and he was reaching in the passenger area of his vehicle, which is a very well-known place to all law enforcement officers for keeping a gun, a knife, whatever, any kind of weapon, a taser, brass knuckles, who knows? This is where people tend to keep those things because when they're in their car, they want easy access to it if they're going to try to use it. So that was with the information we had then, and we were being told, oh, you know, he's just a dad who was trying to break up a fight between two women, and this is so awful, and it's this terrible murder. And all the Democrats, you know, oh my gosh. It turns out the guy's wanted on a variety of crimes, including sexual assault, which I thought Democrats were always telling us how serious that is as a crime. It is a very serious crime. So isn't that noteworthy here? He's wanted on a felony arrest warrant. The police were called. This is what we found out since that initial day that, remember, led to riots, led to destruction and looting. We find out that the police were called because of Blake, that he was the reason. This is based on the radio transmissions from the officer's patrol car, right? They have recordings of this. The police were told, yeah, it's because of this guy, and there's a warrant for him. So they show up to a domestic disturbance with a guy with a felony sexual assault warrant against him. They try to take him to the ground. They use a taser on him. He manages to, because remember, you can't use chokeholds, you can't use these submission holds anymore, can't do any of that. He manages to get away from the two officers, which if you've ever tried to hold somebody who really is, you know, desperate to get away from you, if you're of even roughly equivalent strength, very difficult to do. Very hard to hold somebody down when you're not also allowed to strike them, put them in submission holds. If you're just going to try to hold them, bear hug them. So he gets away from the two officers, goes around to his car. The officers know that now this is a high threat situation. Why isn't he complying? He's already fought them. He's a wanted felon. Alleged felon. Why is none of that registering with him? What could he possibly be thinking? There are multiple officers with guns drawn on him. If he won't listen to that, what does he have in mind? These are the thought processes of the officers on the scene. You can just think through it yourself. Put yourself in their shoes. And then he is clearly trying to get into his car and is reaching for something. He has an officer with his holding his T-shirt from behind, trying to pull him out of the vehicle. What does this guy think he's accomplishing at this point? Some of us, like me, were saying, how is it that we did not know right away, day one? Why did we not know that there was in this Kenosha? Remember, this has led to the whole conflagration this week. Was this one arrest and shooting? Did Blake have a gun or a weapon in the car? Go back yesterday's show, the day before that, I kept asking, why do we not know this? Why do we not know if there was a weapon in the car? Now remember, the standard for law enforcement isn't that they need to be able to guess whether you have a weapon accurately. It's if they have a credible reason to believe that a person is going to imminently use a weapon on them, they can use lethal force. If someone wants to commit suicide by cop, which does happen, and they have their hand at their waistband and they say, I've got a gun, and the officer says, "Show me your hands." And the suspect says, "I've got a gun." And the officer says, "I'm going to shoot unless you show me your hands." And the person pulls their hand out from behind them and they get shot in that process. This actually happens. This same event plays out tragically across the country many, many times over. If that person has a Snickers bar in his hand, if that person has a rusty spoon, it doesn't matter. If the cop shoots that person, they're going to be cleared for that because they don't have to wait when someone has already presented themselves as being armed and a threat. They don't have to wait to make out the serial number on the Heckler and Koch that is being pointed at them. They just get to defend themselves. Hey, Team Buck, thank you so much for watching The First on YouTube. If you like this video, please click that little thumbs up button so then it will log as liked. And also, if you want to see more great content from The First, please click subscribe.